Can Wuthering Waves be your new main game? Depends. Main game can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, so let's break that down a little bit. In case you missed it, recently on the CN side, Wuthering Waves has just announced that they're going to have another private beta, just exclusive on the CN side, taking place. Recruitment is starting November 27th to December 4th. This is going to be fully closed, meaning there's going to be no public information. You're not going to be allowed to stream it, post video content, or anything for it publicly. Now, does that mean there's not going to be any leaks? Probably not. There's probably going to be leaks, but I would recommend you try and avoid those to avoid being disappointed if things do end up being changed, but I'm sure something is probably going to sneak its way through. On top of that, however, though, we did have the announcement earlier this year that the publishing license for Wuthering Waves for CN has been approved, which usually means the game is going to be published within 1 year of being granted that license. With both pieces of information, a lot of people are speculating that Wuthering Waves is going to be coming out sooner rather than later. I would be prone to agree to this, assuming that this new private test and probably the following closed beta test are successful. I think we could totally see this by like Q2 of next year. I don't think that's unreasonable to say. Q2, in case you didn't know, is April, May, and June, kind of like, late spring, early summer. But it's started to stir up some more questions. And one thing that I've heard people talk about when it comes to gacha games is the idea of a main game. A game that you can play as kind of like your full-time, prolonged period content that you can keep going back to, and you don't need to jump between all of these different games and titles because none of them have the content for you that you can play it long term. So, can Wuthering Waves be that main game? Well, not forever.
What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean?
I think we need to just have the idea of like a main game kind of start to be erased a little bit. The only games that can have any potential for being a main game long term are ones that thrive on player versus player based content, because that's the kind of content that has the most replayability and the most variability within it to kind of cover it and play with it long term. Wuthering Waves is a primarily PvE based game with some co-op elements that have been added into it. You're not going to be getting raids like in World of Warcraft. You're not going to be getting a roguelike experience like Risk of Rain. Or you're not going to get the Battle Royale experience of COD or Fortnite, where every game can be a little bit different depending on who you're faced against, what weapons you find, and each game can kind of feel new in that way because it's PvP and it's got the RNG elements along with it. Wuthering Waves is not that kind of game. Wuthering Waves is an open world exploration that's going to have some PvE content of world bosses, as well as a primary narrative that's going to be driving players through the game. Games of that kind can never serve to be your main game forever. And that's simply because there is not enough content in the game to be your main game long term. And the rate at which new content gets released is not going to be sufficient enough for you to classify it as a main game in that way. I think one of the biggest reasons for that as well is because it is a gacha. When you play a game like Elden Ring, not a gacha game, you can go in and you can play that game until you've beat it. You can go and fire mobs in different areas to get the runes you need. You can work on your different builds, go and fight the different bosses in the game, and there's nothing preventing you from doing that other than skill and time. You can continue to do that forever. When it comes to gacha games, almost without fail, there will be some mechanic designed to stop you from playing. This is true for Punishing Gray Raven, this is true for Zenless Zone Zero when it eventually launches, or this is even true for something like AFK Arena or Nikke. There's going to be some mechanic to stop you. When it comes to Honkai Star Rail, for example, it's the Trailblaze power, where you only have a certain amount of power that you can use daily to farm different relics or materials to raise your units. If you don't have any story quests to continue to play through, then once that resin's done, there's literally nothing for you to do except to continue to farm and try and beat the simulated universe, I guess. But I do think you'll probably get bored of that pretty quickly if that's all that you're doing over and over again. So there will always be a cap to how far you can level your characters to progress through the game. It's the same thing for Wuthering Waves. There's going to be a stamina-based system used to lock materials for raising your different units. So you are going to be capped in that way. Where I think Wuthering Waves differentiates itself from most other gachas, excluding one, is it does have the benefit of the open world element. One of the reasons why I think Genshin succeeded at becoming people's main game, despite some of the other, kind of COVID boost and some of the other things surrounding it at its time, is that it was an open world experience. If you caught up on the story, if you ran out of your stamina for raising your characters, you still had a whole world to explore. And so you could jump into co-op, go and fight some bosses, not get any materials, but still do that with some friends, go explore the new region, collect all the resources, find all the different oculuses in the different areas to increase your stamina. There was still progression available for you in the early game, even when you were capped by that, artificially capping system. Especially, for example, in the early game of Genshin, there was a cap for unlocking story quests based on your adventure rank level. The primary way you were supposed to raise that after you completed the story quests was using the stamina. That was obviously capped on the regeneration rate of the stamina. However, being an open world, you could go around and you could farm chests. Chests also gave you XP. So you could run around and you had a reason to go and explore the region because it would level you faster in your adventure rank to unlock more of the story quest, which then in turn you could continue to play longer and longer. Having the open world as a foundational mechanic for the game is what enabled people to treat it like a main game, because there was more you could do even if you were out of stamina. This is where I think Wuthering Waves is also going to be able to stand above other gacha games. Anytime you start a new gacha game, you are going to be able to have that new game smell, sprint through, have getting levels so you're getting more stamina to continue to clear through the game, to continue to raise your units, to get those free pulls and to get that excitement, but you will eventually hit that wall. That is how gachas are designed. Wuthering Waves is going to have the benefit of an open world available so that if you are depleted on your stamina, you are completed on the story, you're going to have regions and things to explore to fill that time. So I think you are going to be able to sink a significant amount of time and play into Wuthering Waves, and I think it is going to be worth the investment, at least based on what we've been seeing so far. I reserve the right to change my opinion. They're going through beta and different testing. If the game continues to change, I might change my mind. But from what we've seen so far, it seems to be there and it seems to be available, and they're improving upon it. But don't misunderstand what I'm saying in that don't go chasing the dragon and jumping into Wuthering Waves, expecting it to be the next big thing that you can put all your time to. You can forsake all other gacha games. You can drop other games because you're going to dedicate everything to Wuthering Waves. You can do that, but you can't do it forever. A game will always eventually run out of content unless, again, there's that PvP cycle and something else available that has that replayability. But a PvE game will eventually run out. That's how they're designed. And frankly, they should. If we are stuck in a vicious cycle where you are forever locked into playing the same game constantly, you will eventually just learn to hate or become extremely bored of that game. Either because you're just playing it too much and you're not getting enough variety, or because the content that they're cranking out so you always have something more to do is just going to be subpar. So it's actually better to go through a bit of those cycles and have it be, highs and lows and take breaks from the game and come back. That's a healthy thing, that's a normal thing, and that's okay. So if you're somebody out there who's you're asking yourself, can Wuthering Waves be my new main game? Can it fill that void left by, Genshin or whatever else it may be? I think if you're coming at it from that perspective, you are already setting yourself up for failure. Don't look at the game in that way. Look at it as its own entity, its own thing that you can have a lot of fun with. And just remember, it is still a gacha game at the end of the day. You will still be limited artificially by some of those factors because that is just part and parcel for the genre. I don't want any of this to detract from the excitement of the game. I personally am still very excited for the game to come out. I'm really hoping that I get into the next closed beta because I really want to see the improvements that they're making on the game. We've been seeing glimpses of it at Gamescom and some of the other conferences that have gone on. We're seeing the redesigns of the characters. We're seeing the improvements to the system. Kuro is listening, and that is a good sign. So I will say continue to have open, clear feedback. Don't overinflate Kuro's ego and thinking that everything's perfect because it's just going to end up not having a great experience. I know Zenless Zone Zero is kind of going through this right now on their side of things where people are arguing about systems that need to be changed or something else that needs to be worked on. I understand that, and maybe we'll make another video talking about that. If you guys are interested, we can cover that a little bit more. Let me know in the comments down below if that's the case. But we need to continue to be realistic about what Wuthering Waves is going to be, because if we set it up as the savior for gacha players as the next great thing to come into the genre that's just going to blow everything out of the water. It's not going to meet your expectations. It's just not going to be that. The game's not God. So don't come into it in that way. So, can the game be your new main game? At least for a little while, sure. I think that's a fair way to put it, but not forever. And no game ever will be. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you and your time. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe, guys. It helps the growth of the channel. We're gonna be covering more PGR, Wuthering Waves, gacha content on this channel. I would greatly appreciate you coming along for the journey. We're getting close to 5K. I wanna hit 5K by the end of this year, guys. We are getting close to December, so we're running out of time. So make sure to drop that subscribe. Greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.